For years, everyone in Sable Creek had heard the rumors, the town's streetlights were haunted. Not by ghosts, but by something far darker. It started with the flickering. At first, it was just the streetlights on the outskirts of town, out by the old mill and the forest edge. Then, one by one, they began to flicker all over town, only at night, just when the clock struck midnight. The pattern never changed, a slow blink, like a pulse, until they went dark for a moment. Then, they would light back up. At first, people just laughed it off. Old wiring, they said. The power grid's faulty, they joked. But after 20 years of the same thing, the laughter stopped. The first time Emily Dunne saw it happen, she was alone. Her parents had warned her about the lights. They had always warned her about them. Never be out when they flicker, Emily, her mother had said, her face pale, her voice a whisper. When the lights go out, don't look at the darkness. That night, Emily was at the library, finishing up her homework. When she stepped outside, the familiar flicker caught her eye. It started at the far end of Main Street, the first one near the diner. A quick blink, and then another. She frowned, shaking her head. That's odd, she thought. But then it happened. The light went out completely. Emily froze, her breath catching in her throat. She knew the rule. No one in town was ever supposed to be out after the flicker. But curiosity, that dangerous pull, urged her forward. She walked down Main Street, her footsteps muffled by the silence. The air was thick, suffocating. And then, she heard it. A voice. Not a whisper. Not a scream. Just, a voice. A low voice. Unfamiliar, but somehow, close. Emily. She stopped. Her pulse quickened. Her eyes darted from the streetlights, now all dark, completely off, to the dark shapes around her. Shadows? No. People. Figures standing motionless in the street, unmoving, but their eyes glowed faintly, like embers in a dying fire. Who's there? Emily called out, her voice trembling. And then the lights flickered again. Only this time, they didn't come back on. The shadows moved. Slowly. Unearthly slow. Her heart hammered in her chest as she sprinted back to the library door, but when she reached for the handle, it wouldn't open. Her fingers fumbled in a panic. She turned back, they were closer. The figures had shifted, like something alive had slipped out of the darkness. Emily. This time, the voice wasn't alone. There were dozens of them, all murmuring in unison, their words incoherent, but unmistakable. The sound of something, waiting. They had been waiting for her. The next morning, Emily was found lying in the middle of Main Street, eyes wide open, unblinking. Her parents rushed to her side, but she didn't move. She didn't speak. She barely breathed. It was as though she had seen something no one was ever supposed to see. Days passed. Emily's condition didn't improve. She remained in a catatonic state, her eyes flickering every now and then, as though replaying the night over and over in her mind. And then, the lights flickered again. This time, it wasn't just one or two. The entire town's lights dimmed and flickered together, like a signal. An alarm. A warning. The same thing that had happened before. But now, something else was different. Emily's parents, frantic and desperate, turned to the town's oldest resident, Old Man Barrow, who had lived in Sable Creek longer than anyone could remember. He didn't say much, but he had seen the flicker for himself. He knew what it meant. There's a pattern, Barrow muttered, his voice thick with age. You look too long. You see them. You look into the darkness when the lights go out. And that's how they take you. What do you mean? Emily's father asked, his voice shaking with fear. Barrow's lips quivered. They're not just shadows, not just people. They're the ones who live in the dark, the ones who were never meant to be seen. And once they've taken you, they don't just take you away. No. They make you part of them. You'll be one of them. One of those things in the dark. Forever waiting. Always flickering. The next night, Emily's parents kept watch. They sat in her room, staring out the window at the flickering streetlights, waiting for something, anything, to happen. It was just after midnight when it started again. The lights blinked once, twice, then went out completely. This time, Emily's father heard a sound, faint at first but growing louder. A voice, echoing down the dark street, unmistakably familiar. Emily. He turned in horror. Emily was standing at the foot of her bed, her eyes wide and glassy, glowing faintly in the dark. Her mouth moved. I'm waiting. Then, the lights flickered back on. And the room was empty. Second story. Sometimes, the truth isn't just unsettling, it's deadly. Charlotte was never supposed to be there. She was a journalist, curious, persistent, but still, just a woman with a pen and paper. Yet, it was that curiosity that led her to the old Marlowe House, a crumbling mansion at the edge of town. The locals called it haunted, but Charlotte was skeptical. Until she saw it for herself. What Charlotte saw in that house was not what she expected. Charlotte's first mistake was arriving at dusk. The mansion stood in a desolate field, far from the nearest town, and was even further removed from any modern civilization. As she pulled up to the rusty iron gates, the house loomed like a forgotten giant, silent, watchful, as if it had been waiting for her. She hadn't meant to go inside. It was just a brief stop, really, a quick photograph for her story on the town's haunted landmarks. But when she stepped out of her car and looked up at the house's darkened windows, she felt something she couldn't quite explain. A presence. A pull. The front door, surprisingly, was slightly ajar. Charlotte pushed it open. The air inside was thick with dust, and the smell of mildew filled her lungs. But there was something else. Something colder. The house was eerily still. Furniture draped in white sheets, the faint echo of her footsteps on creaky wooden floors. But it wasn't the house itself that unsettled Charlotte, it was the paintings. Everywhere she turned, there were eyes. Eyes that followed her every move. The faces in the portraits were strange, their expressions caught somewhere between joy and sorrow, as if frozen in a moment of tragedy. And there was one painting, bigger than all the others, hanging above the staircase. It depicted a young girl with wide, terrified eyes, her mouth open in a silent scream. Charlotte couldn't help herself. She approached the painting, studying the girl's face. The more she looked, the more she felt as though the girl was looking back at her, pleading, warning her. But Charlotte was a journalist. She wasn't one to back down from a story, no matter how unsettling. She snapped a photo of the painting, her camera's flash illuminating the dim hallway. That's when she heard it. A soft, breathless whisper, as though someone was speaking directly into her ear. Don't look at it. Charlotte spun around. There was no one there. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she shrugged it off. Just the wind, maybe. She took another step down the hallway, toward a door at the far end. But as she reached for the handle, the door creaked open on its own. Inside, there was nothing but a large, dusty mirror hanging on the wall. Charlotte stepped closer, her reflection staring back at her. For a brief moment, she thought she saw something behind her, an outline, faint but unmistakable. She turned quickly, but the room was empty. It wasn't until she left the room that Charlotte realized something was wrong. The hallway was no longer the same. The portraits had shifted, changed. The figures in the paintings, those same ones with the hollow eyes, were no longer still. They were moving. Slowly, ever so slightly, as if they were coming to life, inch by inch. Her breath hitched. She grabbed her camera to snap another picture, but the lens wouldn't focus. The light flickered, then went out entirely. The house shifted with a groan, as if it were waking up. The air grew heavier, colder. Charlotte could feel something coming. In a panic, she turned back toward the front door, but it was no longer there. She stumbled backward, her heart racing. The windows, too, were no longer visible. She was trapped. And that's when she heard it again. A whisper. This time, more urgent, more clear. You shouldn't have seen it. Suddenly, the front door did open, but not into the outside world. Charlotte stepped into what she thought was the entryway, but she found herself facing the same staircase, the same hallway, the same painting. It was as though she had never left. No, she realized now. She hadn't left. The truth hit her like a wave. The house wasn't haunted. The house was alive. It wasn't the place that was cursed, it was the people who entered it. Once someone stepped inside, they were trapped within the house's story, forever repeating the same horrifying cycle. The girl in the painting? She wasn't a victim of the house. She was its first witness, and now, Charlotte was the next. Charlotte's reflection in the mirror grinned back at her, as if it knew exactly what she was about to realize. The cycle had begun again. Third story. Jacob Calloway had always been a man of the land. Born and raised on his family's farm, he knew nothing but the fields, the seasons, and the hard work that came with them. But when his father passed away, leaving him with the dilapidated farmstead, Jacob found that the land had its own dark secrets, secrets that only revealed themselves during the harvest. The Calloway farm had been in Jacob's family for generations. The farm was famous in the area for its corn so sweet and abundant that the town depended on it. But Jacob always felt a strange weight to the place, especially when the harvest season rolled around. His father had often warned him not to let anyone near the fields during the harvest. "There's things in those fields, Jacob." His father's cryptic words echoed in his mind, though Jacob never understood what he meant. Now, with his father gone and the farm in disrepair, Jacob needed to make this harvest count. The land was dying, and the crops had become sparse. With little money left, Jacob worked day and night, trying to salvage what was left of the family legacy. But then, the whispering began. It started small, voices in the wind, whispers carried on the breeze. At first, Jacob dismissed it. Just the wind, he thought. But the voices grew clearer each night. Sometimes he could hear his father's voice, others, a woman's voice, softer, almost pleading. "Help us, Jacob, help us." The voices called out from the cornfields, just beyond the barn. He tried to ignore it, chalking it up to exhaustion and grief. But one night, unable to sleep, Jacob ventured out into the fields to investigate. As he walked deeper into the corn, the whispering grew louder, more insistent, as if the very earth itself was speaking to him. His heart raced, and sweat beaded on his forehead. The moon was full, casting long, eerie shadows across the rows of corn. And that's when he saw them. Shapes, figures, moving between the stalks. At first, they seemed like people, but as Jacob drew closer, they faded into the shadows, leaving behind nothing but the sound of the wind rustling through the leaves. He wasn't alone. Over the next few days, Jacob noticed something even stranger: the corn was growing at an unnatural rate. He would wake up to find entire rows of corn fully matured, as if they had been growing for months in the span of a single night. He even saw one of the stalks sway and bend, though no wind was blowing. But the more he harvested, the more he felt something watching him. One evening, Jacob decided to stay out late to finish picking. The sun had set, and the sky turned a sickly shade of orange, casting long, distorted shadows. As he worked, he heard footsteps behind him, slow, deliberate, like someone walking through the rows of corn. But when he turned around, there was no one there. Then, he found something. A small wooden figure, crudely carved, like something out of an ancient ritual. It was hidden in the soil, half buried beneath a stalk of corn. It was an image of a man, but the face was warped and twisted, its features grotesque and unnatural. Jacob's blood ran cold. He knew this figure. It was something his father had kept hidden, an old family heirloom from when they first settled on the land. Jacob's father had told him the legend of the corn keeper, a spirit that protected the harvest. But the spirit didn't just protect it, it demanded something in return. Every harvest, it required a sacrifice. Jacob's heart pounded in his chest as he stared at the figure. He had heard the stories, of course, but he always thought they were just that, stories. But now, as the whispers grew louder, the truth became undeniable. That night, the wind picked up, carrying voices that echoed across the land. But these weren't voices of warning anymore. These were voices of anger. The earth beneath Jacob's feet seemed to pulse as if it were alive, a living, breathing thing. The next day, Jacob found something horrifying in the barn. The body of a deer, its eyes wide with terror, was strung up, its limbs twisted and contorted. The cornfield had taken it, using it as some kind of gruesome offering. Jacob understood then, the land wanted a sacrifice. He needed to make a choice, continue the harvest and feed the land, or refuse, knowing the consequences would be dire. The voices called out again, but this time, they weren't asking. They were demanding. The earth rumbled beneath his feet, and the corn swayed violently, as if beckoning him. Desperate to save his farm, Jacob made the ultimate decision. He would give the land what it wanted. But as he walked into the heart of the cornfield, ready to offer up his sacrifice, he froze. In the center of the field, he saw a figure standing still, his father, standing there as if he had never died, looking at him with hollow, empty eyes. "You should have listened to me, Jacob," his father said, his voice cold and distant. "This land takes what it needs. It always has. And now it's time for you to join it." Jacob's heart stopped. The twist wasn't just in the land, it was in him. He wasn't offering a sacrifice. He was becoming one. The land had been calling for him all along, using his grief and desperation to claim him. As the earth swallowed him whole, Jacob understood the terrifying truth: the Callaway farm was never about the harvest. It was about keeping the land alive, feeding it with the souls of those who worked it. And now, he was part of it.